In the distant future, in the year 10,191, mankind has mastered interstellar travel, establishing safe routes between planets. The universe consists of various planets, which are ruled by Emperor Shaddam Corrino IV. Each planet has its own noble family, headed by princes who are subjects of the emperor. Prominent among these planets is Arrakis, a desert planet that is the sole source of a valuable mineral called spice. The spice is a substance of inestimable value, enabling interstellar travel and giving some people the ability to predict the future. At the beginning of the story, Chani, a native of Arrakis, tells of the spice harvesters, the Harkonnens, who arrived on the planet before she was even born. They dominate the extraction of the spice and have become richer than the emperor himself. Arrakis remained under the control of the Harkonnen until the day they were forced to leave the planet by the emperor's decree. Chani is convinced that the emperor will send another faction to replace the Harkonnens and exploit the riches of Arrakis. The action then shifts to Caladan, the home world of the Atreides family. Prince Paul, and heir to the family, wakes up haunted by recurring dreams. He eats breakfast in the company of his mother, Lady Jessica, who is a member of the mysterious Bene Gesserit organization. Bene Gesserit is an ancient order of women endowed with extraordinary physical and mental abilities, achieved through intense training and the influence of a spice from Arrakis. Their most important task is to forge the Kwisatz Haderach, a man of their order capable of predicting the future and ushering humanity into a new era. Jessica has been training Paul for years, teaching him to use the voice, the ability to manipulate others by modulating the tone and frequency of his voice.
Give me an order.
Thanks to this training, Paul has the ability to see the future and other unique powers that he is gradually discovering. Immediately after breakfast, Paul delves into reading a book and listens to a lecture on the planet Arrakis. He discovers that the planet is extremely inhospitable to life outside of urban areas due to extreme climatic conditions and treacherous atmospheric phenomena. Sandstorms on Arrakis are so powerful that they can cut through metal. Only the indigenous people known as Fremen have adapted to survive in such extreme conditions. The Fremen share the harsh desert environment with giant sand maggots, which they call Shai Hulud. It is these maggots that are the source of spice. Long-term exposure to the spice causes Fremen's eyes to acquire a distinctive blue color, which is the hallmark of spice addicts. This phenomenon is called the Eyes of Ibad. Fremens regard these altered eyes as a gift from God. For Fremen, the spice has the character of a sacred hallucinogen that prolongs life and has numerous health benefits. A ship belonging to a council overseen by the emperor lands on the planet Caladan. In the evening, the prince of the Atreides family, Leto, receives representatives of the Landsraad political body, representing all noble families. They relay an order from Emperor Shaddam, who recently removed the Harkonnen family from Arrakis and now wants the Atreides to take their place and take up spice mining on the planet. During this meeting, Jessica spots Gaius Helen Mohiam, Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit organization, who is keeping a close eye on Paul. The meeting ends when Leto confirms his acceptance of the Emperor's orders by marking his seal on the document. The scene then moves us to the preparation of the Atreides troops for the expedition to Arrakis. Among them is Swordmaster Duncan Idaho, a close friend of Paul's. Paul expresses his desire to join him and shares premonitions about his dreams regarding Arrakis and the Fremen, in which he saw Duncan dying in battle. Duncan reassures Paul, assuring him that everything will be fine, and flies off to Arrakis to prepare the ground for the arrival of Paul and his family. The scene then shifts to Paul, who asks his father for the opportunity to participate in a mission to Arrakis. Paul's father, however, refuses. He explains that he needs Paul by his side because they will face threats of a political nature on Arrakis. Leto explains that the high noble families see them as leaders, which is a threat to the emperor. Taking control of Arrakis from the Harkonnens and handing it over to the Atreides is intended to plant the seeds of a conflict that would weaken both sides. Unlike the previous ruler of Arrakis, Baron Harkonnen, Leto intends to treat the indigenous Fremen people with respect and use the true potential of Arrakis to make his family stronger than ever. To that end, he has already sent Duncan to form an alliance with the Fremen. Later we see Paul and his mentor Gurney Halleck practice dueling. They both use devices on their hands that generate a protective layer around their bodies. Halleck expresses concern that on Arrakis they may be attacked by jealous Harkonnens, whom he refers to as beasts. For this reason, he advises Paul to exercise extreme caution upon arrival on the planet. Then we move to Giedi Prime, the home planet of the Harkonnen family, where the former ruler of Arrakis, Baron Harkonnen, is talking to his cruel nephew Rabban about the last ship leaving Arrakis. Rabban expresses his rage at the Emperor for taking away from them the Arrakis they built. Rabban is surprised when the Baron reveals that the Emperor is actually plotting against the Atreides family, envious of their growing popularity. The Emperor plans to kill Prince Leto and his men while mining for spice on Arrakis. After returning to Caladan, Lady Jessica wakes Paul during the night and takes him for a medical examination. It turns out that Reverend Mother Helen Mohiam has learned of Paul's visions and wants to see if he is the Bene Gesserit's long-awaited Kwisatz Haderach. Using the voice, she orders Paul to put his right hand in a box to test his ability to control his impulses by threatening him with a poison needle called a gom jabbar held to his neck. The test is that if Paul removes his hand from the box, he will die. The test is designed to test Paul's ability to control his instincts. If he fails, he may be deprived of his life because he inherits too much power. After the test, Lady Jessica explains to Paul that the Bene Gesserit is an ancient organization of women that has controlled the politics of the empire behind the scenes for centuries. For millennia, it has carefully planned the crossing of genetic lines to create a man with a mind powerful enough to bridge space and time, past and future. The test to which Paul was subjected was to determine whether he was the long-awaited Kwisatz Haderach, the Messiah of Arrakis. The next day, Leto, Paul, Jessica, and their soldiers prepare for an expedition to Arrakis. Upon landing on the planet, they are greeted by the native Fremen, who already seem to believe that Paul is their long-awaited Messiah from another world called Lisan al-Gaib. As he flies to his new quarters, Paul notices the impressive barrier wall that protects the city from the giant sand maggots of the Shai Hulud. He learns that these huge bugs, reaching 400 meters in length, are endemic to the Arrakis desert. In order to traverse the desert safely, the Fremen use a peculiar movement technique called sand marching, which mimics the irregular sounds natural to the environment, thus avoiding attracting the attention of the maggots. As Paul watches the holograms, a grotto beetle, a deadly insect, emerges from the wall and tries to kill him. With his hitherto untapped abilities, Paul surprisingly controls the situation with ease, thwarting the attack and capturing the insect at the crucial moment. Investigation reveals that a Harkonnen soldier hiding in the walls was behind the assassination attempt. The scene shifts to a secret meeting between Baron Harkonnen and Reverend Mother Helen Mohiam. Mohiam has learnt of a plot by the Emperor and the Baron to launch an attack on the House of Atreides by the Emperor's elite army, the Sardaukars. Although this is the Emperor's order and Mohiam has no influence to change it, she demands protection for Jessica and her son. The Baron assures her that he has never violated the sanctity of the Bene Gesserit order and will not harm them. As the Reverend leaves his headquarters, the Baron points out that Arrakis is governed by its own strict laws. The scene then shifts to Arrakis, where officials are discussing plans for spice mining. Thufir Hawat, Mentat of the House of Atreides, has copies of Harkonnen's account books, which show that as much as 10 billion Solaris were extracted from Arrakis annually. However, due to damage to equipment left behind by the Harkonnen, expectations of such profits are currently unattainable. At this point, Duncan appears returning from a preparatory mission to Arrakis. He tells Paul and Leto about life among the Fremen, with whom he has spent the last 4 weeks. Duncan shares his knowledge of their survival methods and hidden oases, known as sitches. The encounter sheds light on the depth and complexity of Fremen society, who live in harmony with the harsh environment of Arrakis. Duncan reports that there are many caves on Arrakis, each of which is home to about 10,000 people. He concludes from this that there may be millions of Fremen living on the planet. The leader of the desert community, Stilgar, also arrives for this meeting. When Stilgar spits on the ground, it is at first perceived as an insult, but it soon becomes clear that it is actually a gesture of respect on Arrakis, where moisture is the rarest commodity. Prince Leto offers Stilgar his cooperation, explaining that Arrakis has been granted to him by the Emperor as a fiefdom, meaning that his job is to manage the planet and protect its resources. However, Stilgar expresses skepticism, pointing out that the newcomers come to Arrakis mainly in search of spice, taking it but offering nothing in return. The meeting ends on mutual understanding when Leto promises to respect the Fremen's underground headquarters and assures them that no one will persecute them under his rule. The next day, Leto and his team set out to inspect the area where they will be extracting the spice. During the conversation, they raise the issue of necessary tools, such as a paracompass, since an ordinary compass is unreliable due to the magnetic field of Arrakis moons. During the inspection, they meet an Imperial planetologist, Dr. Kynes, who is examining Leto's suit called a philtrum. It is an advanced filtration system that cools the body and recovers water lost through sweat, while the body's movements provide it with power. Looking at Paul's suit, Kynes notices that he has tied his boots in a manner characteristic of Fremen, which surprises her, given that this is his first visit to Arrakis. This detail makes her reflect on the prophecy that speaks of the stranger, who instinctively knows the customs of the Fremen as if they had always been known to him. While inspecting areas where spice is being mined, Leto and his team come across a harvester harvesting the valuable resource. Watching from a height, they spot signals warning of approaching giant desert maggots. The situation becomes complicated when one of the anchors of the salvage scraper breaks, making it impossible to evacuate the machine. Leto immediately decides to undertake a rescue operation. Shortly before the attack, in dramatic circumstances, they manage to get the crew on board. During the rescue operation, Paul experiences the intense influence of the spice, which causes him to have visions. After returning home, he continues to feel its effects. The doctor confirms that the spice has psychoactive effects, and Paul is particularly sensitive to it. Paul shares his visions with his mother, Jessica, and that in his vision he saw the Fremen girl and as if he saw his own death, only he didn't die. He also reveals to Jessica that she is pregnant, which she only just found out, indicating his extraordinary precognitive abilities. The scene then shifts to the Imperial Army planet, where the Sardaukar army, known as the Emperor's Blade and considered the deadliest fighting force in the universe, is preparing to attack the Atreides family. On Arrakis, a doctor delivers a quasi-medicine to Paul, designed to help him fight his allergies. Simultaneously, Leto and Jessica are given a sleeping agent. Jessica decides to take it, but Leto remains vigilant. When the Sardaukar army launches an attack, Leto, having realized the situation, summons his guards and activates his protective shield. However, before he has time to take further steps, the doctor paralyzes him with a poisoned arrow that slowly robs him of his consciousness. Meanwhile, outside, the Sardaukar army is spreading chaos, taking Atreides' forces completely by surprise. The Sardaukar's numerical superiority and their advanced arsenal enable them to quickly defeat the defenders. At the same time, the doctor reveals to a weakened Leto that he is betraying them because Baron Harkonnen has kidnapped his wife and that he is the exchange currency for her freedom. After taking Leto's ring, the doctor promises to do everything in his power to help. He then places a poisonous molar in Leto's mouth, explaining that a strong bite will release a deadly gas, capable of killing everyone nearby, which may be the only chance to defeat Baron Harkonnen. Meanwhile, the Sardaukar army kidnaps Paul and Jessica to abandon them in the unforgiving Arrakis desert. Waking up on the plane, Paul notices his bound and gagged mother beside him. Communicating with her through gestures, he receives a signal from her to use the appropriate tone modulation of the voice. At a critical moment, Paul successfully uses the voice to force one of the kidnappers to remove the gag from Jessica's mouth. Then, using their abilities, mother and son defeat their tormentors and escape into the desert. Meanwhile, Leto, who is in an unconscious state, regains consciousness in the main room, stripped of his clothes. The doctor who betrayed the Atreides tries to negotiate freedom for his wife, but his pleas end in death at the hands of the Baron. Facing imminent danger after the Baron says his family is dead, Leto decides on a desperate move. He bites on the molar the doctor gave him, releasing a poisonous gas that kills everyone in the room, including himself. At the same time, Paul and Jessica find shelter in the desert and pitch a tent from a survival kit. There they discover a note from the treacherous doctor, who foresaw the possibility of their survival, and left for them the Atreides family signal transmitter and Leto's ring. The realization that Leto is dead brings them great sadness, and they both mourn his loss. The next day, Duncan shows up to meet the Imperial environmentalist and representative of the Fremen, Dr. Leet Kynes. Duncan learns that the Emperor deliberately doomed the Atreides by sending them to Arrakis. After the incident at Baron Harkonnen's palace, just after the poisonous gas has dissipated, his soldiers enter the room. To their amazement, the Baron survived by tying himself to the ceiling. Meanwhile, on Arrakis, Paul experiences another prophetic vision caused by the presence of spice in the air. In his vision, he sees a holy war spreading throughout the universe, and he himself takes part in it. The image of thousands of dying people fills him with horror. Concerned about her son's condition, Jessica tries to calm him down. Soon after, Paul puts on his father's ring and formally assuming the title of Duke of Atreides. Duncan soon finds them and pays tribute to Paul by titling him Prince. Kynes takes all three to a safe place, an old ecological station designed to provide Arrakis with water resources. The project had the potential to turn Arrakis into a paradise but was abandoned after the discovery of spice in the planet's sands. The focus on exploiting the valuable spice caused the idea of transforming Arrakis to be abandoned. In a dramatic twist, the Sardaukar army reaches the desert environmental station where Duncan, Jessica, and Paul find refuge. Despite Paul's pleas to withdraw, Duncan decides to stay and fight. Unfortunately, Duncan loses his life during the heroic fight, just as Paul had foreseen. Meanwhile, planetary ecologist and Atreides ally Liet Kynes directs Jessica and Paul to a two-person plane that will take them to safety south. Kynes herself heads to the next station to report the attack to Landsraad. However, on the way, she herself falls victim to the Sardaukars. When they try to kill her, she rhythmically hits the sand and attracts a giant sand maggot, which eats everyone including herself. What a terrible way to die. Meanwhile, Jessica and Paul's plane, being chased by two enemy fighters, falls into the middle of a sandstorm. In the next scene, Baron Harkonnen undergoes treatment to negate the effects of the poisoning. At this time, Rabban informs him of the death of the Atreides family, convincing him that they died fleeing in the Coriolis storm. The Baron orders Rabban to exterminate the Fremen and manipulate the spice market to keep the price high, which is crucial to their economic plan. The scene shifts to Jessica and Paul, who have landed safely in the desert of Arrakis despite a plane crash. Dressed in suits designed to conserve water, they begin a search for the Fremen. Using the knowledge he has gained from his lessons on Fremen, Paul leads his mother using a sand marching technique to avoid attracting sand bugs. They hike throughout the day, and Paul has visions about a girl who tells him not to give up. Unexpectedly, a sandworm appears nearby. When the giant emerges from the sand to devour the two, it is distracted by the sound of a thumper in the opposite direction. Stilgar enters the scene with his group. Some of the Fremen express their doubts about Paul's messianic destiny. The situation escalates when Stilgar insults Jessica. Demonstrating her skills, Jessica takes him hostage, showing her strength and determination, while Paul takes aim at them from a distance. A peace agreement is reached, and the Fremen leader vows to protect Paul and his mother. The leader then notices the sunrise and encourages everyone to go to Seichtaber to decide Paul and Jessica's future fate there. At this point, the girl from Paul's vision appears behind him and introduces herself as Chani. The situation becomes complicated when one of the Fremen challenges Paul to a duel, which, according to local customs, must end in the death of one of the participants. Chani hands Paul a knife made from the tooth of Shai Hulud, which Paul recognizes from his visions. She then tells him that Jameis is an experienced fighter and will not suffer because of it. Paul, who has trained all his life, has never killed a man before. He hesitates, but in the end, remembering his visions and hearing an inner voice, he deals the fatal blow to Jameis. Then Paul expresses the belief that his destiny is in the desert. A vision of a man riding a huge Shai Hulud seems to foreshadow his journey ahead. Chani confirms that this is only the beginning of Paul's adventures, foreshadowing further events, which I will present in the second part. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date. Thank you for watching.